Civilization 6 is a primarily economic game where even a small war can prove costly. But what if we supersize that cost? Can you beat Civ 6 while permanently at war? We can't conquer anybody and have to play with the actually balanced Napoleon mod as it seems fitting for the challenge. So sit back, smash that like button like you just got released on parole from your chastity cage, and let's settle our great capital of Paris as we are immediately at risk of losing. With deity difficulty, we need to properly set up the institutions of our nation quickly or else risk falling behind the entire world. To do that, we first need to know what we're working with and set out to explore the starting area to plan settlements, clear out the indigenous peoples, discover peaceful allies, and decide on a research budget. The research is key as we need to discover key industrial and militaristic advancements. We will first learn how to shoot sticks very far, as the farther we are, the more likely we are to kill the enemy before they can reach our lines. Standardize the written language for bureaucratic purposes, learn how to gently caress the soil to extract luxurious resources to keep the people happy, and finally how to pilfer precious minerals to help our military. With all our bases covered early on, we can set out an expedition party. We meet a nearby unfriendly peoples, however they are too strong for us to genocide just yet. Instead, we ask our two new allies to the west to deal with them, and after some schmoozing and sending of envoys to steer their foreign policy to a more French outlook, we organize a coalition to deal with the threat. Our military is suspiciously absent from the pre-industrial Auschwitz as they are too busy discovering our first major enemy, the English. I couldn't have written a better script. We need to discover where her empire lies and how dangerous they are to our plans, but in our expedition we uncover a lifeline. A river we can use to nullify their threat in the future, but while we search for the river's origin, our people demand establishment of a civic code to aid the economy and help organize settler parties. We seek to establish an early empire to begin colonization and organize the state's workforce to aid in the bureaucracy of settlement expeditions. With our civic code planned out, we can now look to begin planning out just where to best send our colonists. With our exploration parties, we've deduced that a mountain path protects our eastern flank and ocean along with our allies protects the west. The indigenous people have been scattered or integrated in special education camps, and we are moving towards a common goal. But while we've ensured a proper setup for a prosperous nation with more than enough land to enact our plans, our southern flank is still vulnerable, as the English can blitz our most valuable city through open terrain. In order to better defend against them, we need to set up fortifications on the Rhine. But how many cities will we need? To answer that question, I send my warrior group to explore the route of the river whilst keeping an eye out for any English settlement parties. However, the river seems to originate near the people of Fez, determining that two settlements should be plenty to secure the south. Through our exploration, we find a barbaric people, and along with Fez, we launch a coalition to eliminate the encampment, dispersing its peoples, as our warriors have found that shouting really loud is an adequate replacement for rap music to get the blood pumping. With the barbarians gone, we place our warrior on lookout to make sure no camps can congregate, as our settling party is almost ready to dispatch. However, on the horizon, the English are making their move. Threatening our defensive plan, we have to get to them first and attempt to scare them off. However, to our horror, they establish the city anyways, placing our capital under direct threat. Instead of peaceful colonization, it seems we'll have to fight for the city. We send in the army, and their violent screams give them the edge needed to win, routing the English army so hard their formation began resembling their teeth. However, our forces are exhausted and need to regroup before they can advance on the city. But in the distance, we observe them building fortifications and decide to cut our losses lest we lose 2/3 of our military strength and seek to return at a later date. After such an embarrassing defeat, we desperately need to secure the second pass, else all is lost for our capital. We immediately send the settler meant for the southern city despite the risk of British influence, and under the protection of our veteran warriors are escorted to the optimal spot and establish a defensive line across the river. To prevent them from concentrating their forces, we send overtures to Bologna, and after some negotiating, we agree to establish trade relations between our cities, which also serves to improve our economy. Before the English can make their own schmoozing moves to secure the West, we send our most skilled diplomat and forge an alliance. With that, they enter the war on our behalf as England has to dispatch troops to defend the Western Front, reducing the pressure on Rouen. But the pressure immediately sees a spike as the Polish nation sends their envoys, and while I'd normally prefer to use Jadwiga as my Chinese finger trap, as per our doctrine, we behead her messengers and declare war. The problem is she is allied with the city of Fez, our old acquaintances, meaning we can't seek to establish control over the Rhine without dealing with both them and England. And with her own defensive fortification and Fez's large standing army, there is no hope of taking the city. With that, we have failed in our attempts to secure the Rhine, only able to control the Rouennese half as our capital is still vulnerable to invasion. But even the people of Rouen have been acting more English as of recently. With such a potential disaster on the horizon, we quickly move to convert the people back to our side. The main complaint is the lack of choices with their resources, and with trade relations with other nations being less than stellar, we are forced to solve the problem with domestic resources, and thus began an effective propaganda campaign detailing how amber and mercury are excellent for the digestive system. And while that may add an unwanted chromosome or two in the near future, this exotic material is enough to address the main complaints of Rouen. However, that still leaves the problem of population pressure, as the English have more of that on Rouen than we do. To serve as a counterbalance, we establish a second settlement and work on increasing Bordeaux's population whilst establishing a monument meant to spread French culture. This is enough to keep the Rouennese on our side until the next era. However, that is not an adequate long-term strategy, and so we need a golden age to give us time to increase population and establish a French identity. With no other options to serve as a rallying cry for our people and too far away to settle the coast and establish our seafaring navy, we are forced to establish a more diplomatic French identity. This comes with the risk of losing our alliance of Bologna to England. However, we steel ourselves to risk just that, and send our most skilled diplomat to Preslav. After some schmoozing, we secure their alliance, which cements the French identity of consuming peaceful diplomacy, and the Rouennese ditch their English customs in favor of the French Golden Age. However, we still need to take the second city for the sake of national defense and make a detour to Swordsman while thankfully reinstating our alliance with Bologna. But something unexpected happens as our enemy Fez begins an attack of their own. If the enemy of my enemy is my friend, then Fez is my Jadwiga body pillow, as they bring in a strange contraption that tears down their wall with 2 shots, as I'd be surprised if the Fez ruling class wasn't on Epstein's list with what they did to Sheffield. But with the newly liberated plot of land and new governance of the philosopher class engaged in such enthralling national debates as, if an Irishman leaves a car in Romania, would the Romanians be able to strip the car before it blows up? Yes, this is who I want to make decisions of national importance. And so they do, as we can more readily take advantage of this opening and race to the river. But in a sea of enemies, we need protection, and send along my forces like Fez was caught modding a Nintendo Switch. The ensuing battle was not easy, as the Fezians had the technological advantage with iron instead of rock and catapults instead of arrows. But by utilizing the terrain to our advantage, we bait them into marshlands and rain arrows down upon them. This forces them to retreat behind cover of the river, giving our brave soldiers the opportunity to do the same. Even with the marsh, we employ superior tactics and hold them off with ranged support, allowing our settler party to move in. And while they realize our plan and move to stop it, it's already too late. However, it's not over yet, as they have proved themselves worthy, having eliminated a stronger walled city in Sheffield. So we still need to win this battle. Despite our tech disadvantage, we use the river and guerrilla tactics to keep our archers safe, and our warrior on a forested hill holds back the enemy, but just barely. However, in their withdrawal, we come in range of a catapult, losing a valiant hero in the defense of Nantes. This opening of the line allows them to brute force their way past our defenses, and the city is wide open. But this building disaster may actually spell an opportunity. Disregarding Napoleon's orders, we move the archer in a vulnerable position to hide our purchasing of a horseman. After realizing it's a trap, the swordsman tries running, but the cavalry's too fast, eliminating the threat while securing another settler for France. And victory for the French. We used the opportunity Fez made and were successfully able to take control of the entire river, which finally allowed us to set up our long sought after defensive front line protecting our heartland from English raids. With some respite from the AI's constant assault, we can now focus on settling the rest of our empire before more barbarians spawn, setting up districts and infrastructure in those cities, all while making sure to defend our southern border and finally deal with Fez. Before we can enact our plans, we first have to settle this vast stretch and make the cities self-sufficient. There are 3 bonuses we need before we can begin settler production: Magnus's provision to get each of our settlers to wank one out before departing, enshrine colonial displacement and exploitation into the Constitution, and establish a civil service which solely deals with our colonial ventures. After securing every advantage we can, it's time to begin the spam. We trained settlers mainly in the capital and were able to build them in 6-ish turns, moving them to the outskirts of Marseille, Lyon, and Calais one after the other. Our capital alone is enough to finish this off, ordering our other cities to begin one of 3 specialized industrial development schemes. What are those different schemes? Well, for the southern cities, we built walled fortifications to prevent any English attack, whilst new, more safe settlements constructed monuments for border growth and cultural enrichment. This enrichment gave us the mandate to begin enslaving our citizens in unsafe working conditions and sweatshops, doubling their productivity. We used our priests and money to support this scheme for all our cities, and with this streamlined production, we have improved our cities to be strong enough to build districts and yields to keep up with the capital. With this vast stretch of land settled and the cities developed, we were prepared for the coming hardship that would soon befall our nation. The Dark Age befell us, reducing our people's standard of living and the economy. Without the smoke and mirrors, we could no longer use our priests to convince freed men to enslave themselves. And the people of Nantes especially became a little uppity, which started a cascade that begun destabilizing our nation. Our first major problem is Nantes and their disloyalty, and after expending so much effort to secure it, we couldn't afford to lose it now. Our social code was filled to the brim with pro-natalist policies, so all that was left was our best statesman, Pingala, to personally take command of the city and work on fixing its many problems. One of which was the lack of cheese on the grocery shelves, so a quick, unionized builder was dispatched to secure a source. With our change from barbaric slavery and new cheese filling the cupboards, the rebellion has died down, so we could now focus on growth. But this might not be the last rebellion, and to ensure one never happens, we need to escape this dark age for France. With our dedication to do better, we inch ever closer to the light for every district we construct. Using this and the fact we were already building districts, I prioritized district production over buildings, which left a comically large amount of empty neighborhoods, but the benefit was we were well on our way to an age some may deem heroic. And with economic activity recovering and loyalties reassured, the nation was stabilized, just in time for external threats to make their appearance. Like a white girl in Delhi, we were accosted from all sides without any warning, including the oceans, a man named Spartacus who has come up with the radical belief that watching people murder each other for sport is barbaric. The first barbarian appeared in the northwest and had been stationed there for quite a while, so that meant when a large number of homosexuals with baguettes begun setting up shop, they were stirred into action. We stemmed the bleeding by paying off most of its members and incorporating them into our local circle jerk. However, there were some who still stood against us. We sent in the cavalry hoping it would put down the rebellion, but their spears and tactics hold us back. Even with the veterancy of our horses, it would come close, but soon reinforcements were arriving, and while the spears attempted a daring escape, our disciplined archers were able to eliminate the last vestiges of uncivilized scum from the north as the survivors hurried on their ships and made their escape. Soon after, a scout appears in the middle of my empire's heartland near my capital. A man named Spartacus has launched his uprising, and we were ill-prepared to handle it as our units are currently engaged in vicious combat against the Thessians and more barbarians in the outskirts. And after laying out the land, we were in danger of them bringing more slaves to the cause. This is bad. We quickly dispatch the cavalry, who ride day and night. This speed surprises the skirmishers, who are unprepared for a cavalry charge to the flank, but their fortifications are too strong for a cavalry charge, and thus our horses await the archers, setting up a trap which the uprising foolishly takes, allowing our cavalry to disperse the staging ground, arresting any dissidents before they can mobilize into fighting forces of their own. However, our master Bate was forced to retreat from the pike, and through a miscommunication, the message to our other archers reached too late, and thus they were behind schedule from where they should have been. Like a miner in a Minecraft SMP, our horseman was isolated and thus was unfortunately liquidated. Make no mistake, this sacrifice was not in vain, nor will it ever be forgotten, as we posthumously name our fabled heroes, the Negro. Okay guys, come on, this isn't funny. Despite our loss, life goes on and our settlers finally achieve manifest destiny. But that is when we remember our own little Dunkirk from earlier and realize the battle may have been won, but the war is still raging. We stand to lose Montpellier, but organize enough citizens to form an archer corps, and with coordination from the sea with Auckland, pincer the boats, leaving only the ranged quadriremes, which were not enough to take the city. But the new city Dijon was a different story. With more coastline for the barbarians to attack, they laid siege to our new settlement and almost had it at one point. In our desperation, we thought of a cunning plan, building makeshift rafts of our own and sending our people out in a night raid. This led to confusion amongst the barbarians, who were forced to retreat, allowing us time to repair the city's defenses and acquire better ships for defense. With this, our darkest hour was over. Being attacked from 5 different fronts, we swiftly dealt with 3 of them, while our ally Preslav was tasked with a 4th. All that was left was to deal with the perpetual thorn in our side. Fez has been raiding our city this entire time, preventing us from sending reinforcements to our skirmishes up north. However, with those rebellions dealt with, it's time to focus our full attention on the belligerent city-state. But this thorn is about to become a cavalry-fueled spike. With Poland appearing and able to attack, we have to defend, as their technological development is quite monstrous. But this is where Napoleon shines. We quickly construct a set of fortifications, and through Napoleon's brilliant leadership, we finish the forts before the Poles can realize what happened. But with the southern pass defended, that still leaves the Fezzian route to deal with. That needs to change, and instead of war and putting down revolts, we opt for a more peaceful method. We organize our envoys and begin sending them one after another to organize a separate alliance behind Poland's back. This smooth talking will undoubtedly take some time, so while we wait on that, we aim to begin a new golden age for our people, one stronger due to our recent suffering, and are close, but there is nothing left to do in the near future. With the distractions, district production is slowed, and the newest scientist has helped a little, but with a navy already built, great people not necessarily scrambling to emigrate to the Civ 6 Pangea's version of Nazi Germany, and no districts to finish, all we have left is a single envoy, an envoy that changed our future. Not only were we finally able to ally Fez, who share maps, but we discover a whole new world outside of our mini-continent. A naturally occurring wonder, just marvelous, and the 3 new distinct people of What Were You Doing in Pakistan? Any 16-year-old can become gay with enough manipulation. And Netflix's Queen Elizabeth. This discovery spurs our people onto a golden age, while also securing our old friend turned enemy Fez as a bulwark against the Poles. However, with 3 new civilizations, French doctrine states that peace and trade cannot be established. Well, maybe just a little, but after that, no more, as we are forced to declare war on every civilization, all of which stronger than us, with our only protection being these mountains. The real challenge starts now. But we can take solace in the fact that with Fez taken, we prevent their raids and secure an ally on our side against the oncoming storm. And with the entire continent settled, barbs dealt with, districts constructed, we have secured as good a chance as any in this world at war. And in in this war-torn planet, we need to figure out a route for our people, and the choice is easy. Our only realistic option is science, since missionaries will get pillaged, excessive grievances will prevent a diplomatic takeover, and Nazi Germany in 1948 would have better odds at spreading their culture. We need to reach for the stars, and in order to do that, we need to industrialize with factories and research labs to test and construct rockets. We cannot forget to power our cities to make up for lost efficiency from trade routes and cooperation with neighbors. All that had to be done while defending against the entire world, which can still land by sea. But our first test came across the continent from our fortifications in the south. Poland has decided to test their luck with a frontal assault, making their move against Fez, but it's too well situated. After that fails, they come after Nantes, but we were ready. With our new bolt-action crossbows and fortifications, even with their technological advantage. By the time they made it past our forts, they were too low on health to do anything and were decimated, repelling the first assault in its entirety, but they no doubt still had more up their sleeve. Reinforcements were called from our capital right as our spies informed us of Poland's plans. At a second invasion, as a pincer was sent as a distraction. But we weren't sitting with our thumbs up our bums this entire time. We were sitting with thumbs up each other's bums while ordering more troops to be sent to the south, as proper Frenchmen should. Setting up knights as a rapid response force in the pass at Thermopylae, and knowing it was a lost cause due to spies in Fez, they pulled back. With the southern front repulsed twice now, the Poles focused their efforts on Fez, but we are not in any position to aid them, and thus begin looking inwards. With the war winding down, we begin efforts to industrialize, but disaster strikes as we're hit with another dark age. Despite this recession, our cities are still loyal as the French identity has long been established. But for how long? We set out to prevent another dark age and gun for heroic, building large monuments. Our people began aptly naming wonders, such as the famous Taj Mahal and Ruhr Valley, turning Paris into a production juggernaut. With this industrial center serving as an example, we can focus on industrializing without having to worry about a reoccurring dark age in our future. We are still dedicated to industrializing the empire and begin construction of various factories as well as research labs, increasing era score, but more importantly allowing us to pull away with science and create much stronger centers of science and manufacturing. And with our nation now mostly industrialized, we still lack electricity, leaving our buildings in a state of inefficiency. To rectify that, we begin construction on coal power plants in specific locations. The cities of Paris, La Rochelle, and Dijon were determined as suitable locations for coal power plants, providing energy to the entire empire, putting a strain on coal reserves. But we had more than enough to keep the lights on until other sources of energy became available. Despite the Dark Age, our industrial schemes were going well, which may have served as a light for our people to reach towards, as this past era showed our people's resilience through our darkest hours. Against constant assault from all fronts, our enemies failed to match Front might, as we were still at the forefront of innovation and industrialization, and it was now time to use this industrial production to end this game for good. With our designated rocket testing grounds constructed, it's time to begin our journey into space. Within 20 turns, a satellite was launched into orbit. However, our economic model is making this more difficult than it should. Without trade and outside perspectives, we are in dire need of self-sufficiency. And honestly, in this situation, we're gonna have to make Joseph Stalin look conservative. Our empire secures an advantage in technological development as well as a boost to productive capacity. But most importantly, it grants us the self-sufficiency needed to not require trade with the outside world to finish the space race. With that, we complete the moon landing and Mars colonies, a milestone for our people, but are still a ways away from colonizing new planets. The tech tree was not favorable this game, as we need every tech to get the exoplanet expedition, and so every city was tasked with investing fully in industrial production, which gave us the research boost needed to begin construction on the last space project. Within a few turns, the exoplanet was built, almost accomplishing what no other civilization could, as we begin construction on boosters. However, there is still one civ that hasn't given up hope just yet. The Empire of the Congo have launched a massive invasion with robots and nuclear submarines. In our single-mindedness on the space project, our navy was ill-prepared to contend contest the landing. It was a race against the clock as we were near the finish line and decided to keep going with rocket production and use the units we had on hand to defend, upgrading our ships to modern destroyers, and through that surprise attack we were able to nullify their naval supremacy, leaving our vessels on standby to prevent any other landings. However, that wouldn't help us against the already landed robots who split in two directions. We were about 6 turns away from colonization and had to defend our heartland. But while our machine guns and modern armor did little to dent the robot, our cities all launched missiles against the creature and begun whittling it down. It was nowhere near enough. But just as it seemed likely that it would ruin everything we've worked towards, they didn't know where my capital was. And this stalling tactic was all the time we needed. And so despite their military might, we complete the last 3 boosters and launch into space, despite being at war with the entire world for the whole game. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe to not miss out on future content, and check out this video where I used peace to convert Hitler and Stalin to the good side.